So today I want to do something different. I want to look at Prof. Jiang, the way Prof. Jiang looks at geopolitics. I want to use his own method on him. I want to put him on the board as a player, not as the guy doing the analysis, but as a piece in a larger game, and see what the position of that piece tells us about the game itself. Because here's the thing that's been bothering me, and I want you to sit with this for a second before I give you my answer. A man with an expulsion order from China for political journalism currently lives, works, and broadcasts from Beijing. He runs a YouTube channel that reaches over 2 million people, almost all of them in countries China considers strategic adversaries. He uses a VPN to access the platform, which means the Chinese state knows he's using it. He has publicly criticized American foreign policy, Israeli policy, Saudi policy, Trump personally. He has not been arrested. He has not been silenced. He has not even been quietly told to stop. How is this possible? Now, most people, when they hear this question, they go to one of two answers. Either he's a CCP agent, which would explain the protection, or he's somehow flying under the radar, which is implausible because the Chinese state knows exactly who's inside its borders. They decide who stays. There is no flying under the radar in modern China. Both of these answers are wrong, and I want to walk you through why. Because the real answer is more interesting and more disturbing than either one. Does that make sense? Okay, let's set up the players. So let's start with Beijing. What does Beijing actually want? Not what Western media says they want. Not the cartoon version, the real version. Beijing wants what every rising power in history has wanted at this exact stage of its arc. They want American decline to happen, but they need it to look self-inflicted. This is critical and almost nobody understands it. If American decline looks like it was caused by China, by Chinese aggression, Chinese manipulation, Chinese trickery, then it triggers a unifying response in the United States and its allies. The American public rallies. NATO holds together. The decline reverses or at least slows. But if American decline looks like it was caused by America itself, by hubris, by overextension, by corrupt elites, by failed wars, then there is no unifying response. Americans blame each other. The institutions lose legitimacy from inside. NATO frays and decline accelerates. Beijing has known this for at least 15 years. You can read it in their own strategic documents if you know where to look. The phrase they use is "let America defeat itself." It's not a slogan, it's a doctrine. So if you're Beijing, what's your optimal information strategy in the West? Think about it for a second. You have basically three options. Option 1, official propaganda. You run state media, push Chinese narratives, and defend Chinese policy. But the problem with that is that nobody in the West trusts the Chinese state media. CGTN and Global Times reach almost no one outside China. The format itself signals this is propaganda before anyone reads the content. And that is total failure. Now, option 2, secret agents. You recruit Western analysts and you pay them to push pro-China narratives. But again, the problem is that it gets discovered eventually. And when it gets discovered, it discredits not just the agents, but everyone whose analysis ever resembled the agent's analysis. It poisons the well for any independent voice that ever criticized America. It is counterproductive. Lastly, option 3, and this is the move. You find someone who is genuinely independent, genuinely not paid, and genuinely doing his own work. Someone whose analysis happens on its own merits to align with the conclusion you want the West to reach. And then you get out of the way. Don't fund him. Don't direct him. Don't even contact him. Just let him broadcast. His independence is the entire point. If he were on the payroll, the analysis wouldn't work. The fact that he's not on the payroll is what makes the analysis devastating. Beijing doesn't need to control Prof. Jiang. They need to not control him. The most strategically valuable thing Beijing can do with a man like Jiang is exactly what they're doing, nothing. Does that make sense? Let me say it again because this is the part that gets lost. The question is not, is Prof. Jiang a CCP asset? The question is, would Beijing's optimal strategy be to recruit someone like Jiang or to leave someone like Jiang completely alone? And the answer, if you actually think it through using game theory, is to leave him alone. If you touch him, you will ruin him. The hands-off posture is the strategy. So that's player one. Beijing's optimal move is to do nothing, and that's exactly what they appear to be doing. I hope this makes sense to you. Okay, now let's keep going. Now let's look at Western media. What does Western media want? Again, not the cartoon version, the real version. Western media. And when I say this, I mean the major newspapers, the cable networks, the foreign policy magazines, the think tank ecosystem. What they want is to maintain their position as the primary interpreters of world events for educated Western audiences. That's the business they're in. That's the position they've held for about a century. When Prof Jiang went viral, this position was threatened in a way that's hard to overstate. Here was a high school teacher in Beijing reaching more people with deeper analysis, faster than the entire combined apparatus of Western foreign policy commentary. And his audience wasn't drifting toward him because they were tricked. They were drifting toward him because his analysis was better than what they were getting from CNN, the New York Times, Foreign Affairs, the Atlantic Council, Brookings, all of it. So if you're Western media, you have a problem. What do you do? Let's think through your options. Option one, engage with the analysis. You take Jiang seriously as an analyst. You debate his framework, test his predictions, and treat him as a peer. And the problem with doing that is, if you do this, you legitimize him. And once you legitimize him, his audience grows even faster, because now he's been validated by the institutions they were already losing trust in. Even worse, now you have to engage with what he's actually saying, which means you have to address points that your own commentators have been avoiding for 20 years now. You'd have to explain why no Western analyst predicted what he predicted. You'd have to explain why your own commentary has been so wrong about Iraq, Russia, Iran, and China for you. Engaging is suicide. Your option two, attack him directly. You call him a CCP agent, you call him a propagandist, and run hit pieces. Some outlets did this, Vision Times, Splice Today, and a few others. But you soon realize that. Problem with this is it doesn't work. His audience already distrusts Western media. A hit piece from the institutions they're abandoning just confirms to them that he's onto something. Direct attack actually grows his audience, and that is counterproductive. Lastly, your option three, and this is the move that someone, somewhere, figured out. Don't engage with him, don't attack him, just rename him. Call him China's Nostradamus. Stop and think about what this nickname does. Nostradamus is not an analyst. Nostradamus is a 16th century French astrologer who wrote vague poems that get reinterpreted every time something dramatic happens. Calling someone Nostradamus is calling them entertaining, mystical, and fun to share at parties and not serious. It is the most elegant insult in the entire history of intellectual containment that I have seen. It looks like a compliment, and it feels like a compliment, and now it's how the audience refers to him themselves. But what it actually does is move him out of the analyst category and into the entertainment category. And once you're in the entertainment category, your work cannot threaten anyone. Entertainment is safe. Entertainment is harmless. Entertainment is clicks and shares and dinner party conversation, and at the end of the day, it does not change how decisions get made in Washington, London, or Brussels. Now, I want to be careful here because I don't think there's a smoke-filled room where Western media editors got together and decided to call him Nostradamus. That's not how this works. What happened is more interesting. Someone, probably a headline writer at a single publication looking for a catchy phrase, used the Nostradamus comparison once. It worked. Other publications copied it. Within weeks, it was the standard reference. And nobody who used it was conscious of what they were doing. They just used what was already in circulation. But the effect is the same as if it had been planned. Once Jiang was Nostradamus, his analysis stopped being analysis. It became prophecy. And prophecy gets shared, but it doesn't get acted on. That is the neutralization. It worked perfectly. It's still working right now. Most of the people watching Jiang's clips and sharing them on Twitter are completing the neutralization without knowing they're doing it. Does that make sense? The nickname is the cage. The cage is invisible because it looks like applause, and the audience built the cage themselves because they thought they were celebrating him. Okay, so that's player two. Let's keep going. We have one more player, and then we put them all on the board. Now, this is the player almost nobody talks about, and it's the most important one. Because the question we still haven't answered is, why did the Nostradamus nickname work so easily? Why did the entire Western commentary class go along with the framing? Why didn't a single major analyst stand up and say, no, this man is not Nostradamus. He is doing serious structural analysis using methods that everyone in our field abandoned years ago, and we should take him seriously? The answer is uncomfortable, and I want you to sit with this one because it's the deepest part of what's going on. Every serious analyst in Washington, London, Paris, Berlin, every person whose job it is to think about geopolitics for a living already knew what Jiang was saying. The Iran trap argument is not original. The structural analysis of empire decline is not original. The game theory framework is not original. Anyone who has read Thucydides, Kennedy's Rise and Fall of the Great Powers, Mearsheimer, Walt, anyone with a master's degree in international relations has been exposed to all of these ideas. They're not secret, they're not hidden, they're foundational. So why didn't any of these analysts say what Jiang said? They had the same training, they had access to the same history. They had more information than Jiang did because they had security clearances, embassy contacts, source networks Jiang doesn't have. They were better positioned to make the prediction than Jiang was, and none of them made it. None of them. And the reason is because their careers depended on not making it. This is the part that's hard to say out loud, but it has to be said. The entire Western foreign policy commentary apparatus runs on incentive structures that punish anyone who says certain things. If you predict American decline, you don't get invited back on cable news. If you criticize Israeli policy in structural terms, you get attacked by lobby groups and your speaking fees drop. If you take Iran's grievances seriously as legitimate strategic interests, you get labeled an apologist and your think tank funding gets reviewed. If you suggest the war on terror was a strategic disaster that hollowed out American military capability, you get pushed out of the policy mainstream and into the wilderness. This isn't conspiracy. It's much simpler than conspiracy. It's just how careers work. You learn very early in this field which sentences end careers and which sentences advance careers. And then you stop saying the career-ending sentences, even in your own head, even when you know they're true. After 20 years of this, you forget you ever knew them. Prof. Jiang says all the career-ending sentences. He says them calmly, in a classroom, with no apparent awareness that they're career-ending. He doesn't have a Western career to protect. He's a high school teacher in Beijing. He cannot be fired from a think tank that doesn't employ him. He cannot lose access to politicians who don't take his calls. He cannot be deplatformed from cable news he was never invited on. The entire incentive structure that disciplines Western analysts has zero leverage over him. This is what Beijing figured out. This is what Western media couldn't engage with. And this is why the Nostradamus framing was the only available response. Because if you treat Jiang as a serious analyst, you have to explain why every serious analyst on your payroll has been silent about the same things for 20 years. And nobody in the commentary class can afford to answer that question. So everyone without coordination, without conspiracy, without anyone in particular making the call agreed silently to treat him as a prophet. The prophet framing protects the commentary class from having to account for its own corruption. Does that make sense? Let me say it once more because this is the part. The reason the cage worked is that the entire commentary class needed it to work. The cage was built collectively by everyone who had something to lose if Jiang were taken seriously. And once it was built, nobody had any incentive to dismantle it. Now we have 3 players and their 3 optimal moves. Beijing does nothing because doing nothing is the strongest move. Western media renames him because renaming is the only attack that doesn't backfire. The commentary class accepts the renaming because the alternative is admitting their own silence. All 3 players, with completely different goals, converge on the same outcome. The outcome is Prof. Jiang becomes the most famous geopolitical analyst in the English-speaking world, and his work changes nothing. Now I want to do what Jiang does. I want to find the historical analog. Because if this pattern is real, it should have happened before. And it has. It's happened many times. The example I keep coming back to is Lu Xun. Lu Xun was a writer in China in the 1920s and 1930s. He wrote brutal, unsparing criticism of Chinese culture, Chinese politics, Chinese self-deception. He was the most respected literary voice of his generation. His critics called him a traitor, a foreign agent, a man who hated his own country. His defenders called him the conscience of modern China. When the Communist Party came to power in 1949, they had a problem. Lu Xun had died in 1936, but his work was everywhere. And his work was the most devastating critique of Chinese society ever written. If you took him seriously as a critic, you had to apply the same critique to the new regime, which was just as deserving of it as the old one. So what did the party do? They canonized him. They put him in the official literary curriculum. They built museums. They printed his face on commemorative materials. They made him a national hero, specifically. A national hero whose criticism was directed entirely at the past, at the old society, at the China that no longer existed. The criticism that could have been turned on the new regime was redirected by canonization into a safe historical category. Lu Xun became Nostradamus of the Republican era. His teeth were removed by the embrace. This is the same mechanism. When you can't suppress someone, you elevate them in a way that defangs them. You make them so big that their specific arguments disappear into their general aura. You make them into a symbol, and symbols cannot make predictions about specific events that powerful people might want to prevent. Prof Jiang is being Lu Xun in real time, and almost nobody is noticing because the elevation looks like victory. He's on Tucker Carlson, he's on Piers Morgan, he has 2 million subscribers. By every visible metric, he's winning. But the metric that matters, does his analysis change any decision in Washington, is the metric where he's losing. And he's losing because all three players on the board want him to lose, even though they want completely different things. Okay, so now I want to be honest about what I don't know. Because if I'm using Jiang's method, I have to do what he does. Name the things I'm sure about and the things I'm not sure about separately. Here's what I'm sure about. Beijing's optimal move with someone like Jiang is to do nothing. Western media's optimal move is to rename rather than engage. The commentary class's incentives lead them to accept the renaming. All three converge and the outcome is real. And here's what I'm not sure about. Does Prof Jiang know about this? Has he figured out that the elevation is actually a containment? Is he aware that the more famous he gets, the less his analysis can possibly threaten anything? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. He might know perfectly well and be making peace with it, because the alternative is silence. He might know and be playing his own longer game. He might not know at all, because the cage is invisible from inside it. He's a man who genuinely loves teaching, who genuinely thinks his work matters, who has been thrust into a level of fame that is hard to process from inside. Any of these is possible. I'm not going to pretend I have access to his private mind. But I will say this. If I were Prof Jiang and I figured this out, the move would be to start saying things that the cage can't contain. Things specific enough, falsifiable enough, dangerous enough that they couldn't be redirected into prophecy. Because the only way to break the Nostradamus framing is to make a prediction so concrete and so threatening that it forces engagement instead of admiration. And we'll see in the next year whether he does that. So where does this leave us? The story we tell ourselves about Prof Jiang, that he's the genius prophet of American decline, is a story all three players on the board have an interest in maintaining. Beijing wants it because his independence is more useful than control. Western media wants it because the prophecy framing prevents engagement. The commentary class wants it because engagement would expose their own silence. The audience participates in the story because it gives them a hero. Everyone gets what they want from this framing. Everyone except the actual project Jiang thinks he's running, which is the project of changing how people understand power. That project is being neutralized in real time by a pattern none of the participants can see, and the neutralization is almost complete. What does GeoTube do with this? We do what Jiang does. We name the players, we identify the incentives, we draw the pattern, and we say it out loud even when it's uncomfortable. We try to be the kind of voice that takes Jiang seriously enough to talk about what's actually happening to him, instead of joining the celebration that's quietly burying him. This is GeoTube. See you in the next one.